Good morning. Thank you so much once again for being on UBC TV. This morning we are analyzing the budget that is to be read, and that is the National Budget 2025-2026 from an economic expert's view on the National Budget 2025-2026 to a youth perspective expert's view on this particular budget. Now in studio with me is Allan Murangira, Muhereza, who is the team lead at Youth for Tax Justice Network. Good morning, Allan.
Good morning, Juliet, and good morning to our viewers.
Thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
As a youth, in your perspective, what are your initial impressions on of the budget?
Well,
youth perspective.
I think when we talk about the budget, of course, it's an estimate of what you hope to collect and then spend. So you allocate and then spend. And of course, when I look at the budget as was passed, the difference actually, as we are going to the budget speech, is that by the time we were having the budget speech, the budget has already been passed and all. So, and if I look, for example, at the allocations for the youth, we are under the Ministry of Gender. Yes, and yes, there is a Youth and Children's Department, and that department, actually the entire Youth and Children's Department was allocated about around 173 billion Uganda shillings. For the Children's Department alone, or the children's sector, it's about 10 billion in the entire 72 trillion.
That's for children?
Yes, for children, about 10 billion. Then for the entire Youth and Children Department, about 173 billion. So in terms of then what that will do for the young people for the next financial year, I will not say it's a good or it's a very promising allocation, but of course the counter-argument could be then there are other monies that have been put elsewhere that young people can take advantage of, in terms of the parish development model, where I say that 30% of that money will also go to young people. There are some other projects like the Grow projects, where you say like young women that can take part of course, regardless of the challenges that those projects may come with. But if you look at what was allocated in terms of the budget allocations to the Youth and Children's Department under Ministry of Gender, it is, I would say, it's a rounding off error when you look in terms of the whole bigger budget. So in terms of me being optimistic, not really. But of course, like I said, someone can then say, but there are other monies that have been put elsewhere that young people can participate or can take a part of or can be deployed for the benefit of young people. But if they were intended for young people, they would have been directly given to the ministry or to the agencies that are responsible for youth and children within the country. Right.
Now the allocations, indeed, as you've expressed, from your expression, they are quite
not existent.
Yes, not existent. But let's look at the priorities, at least, that the government has outlaid for the budget 2025-2026. Do you think these priorities align with the reality on ground?
Yes, actually I was going to say that priorities, it is one thing to say it's a priority. You only see if it's a priority where the money has been put.
Allocated.
Yes. And there is a very clever government term, what they even call, they even have unfunded priorities. So you can imagine it's a priority, but it's not funded.
In fact, the unfunded are the ones that actually shot it to
the 70. So I think when it comes to the priorities, I think two things that stand out for this financial year. When we are dealing with the tax bills, I think one commendable amendment was made to give startups a tax solid of about 3 years in terms of if you come and you start a business, and then in terms of what is expected of you when it comes to corporate income tax or to the corporate income tax, and then the other sort of taxes. There is agreement that as a young business, now of course the challenge is we don't differentiate which businesses get to benefit, because we have very many people that could take advantage of such an amendment or such a priority. But I think the thinking was that if we are encouraging young people to start businesses, if we're encouraging young people to invest and create jobs and all that, at least when it comes to tax compliance or when it comes to requirements around tax or contribution to tax, then we can give them some sort of a break for 3 years. And of course, we thought it could be more. We thought it could be 5 years. Within 3 years, well, you would not know whether you would have broken even or whether you would have gotten the benefit that you want to. But at least it's a start that, you know, you start and then, and of course, the other good thing or the other catch about that is that then you're expected to provide some bit of information to the tax authorities, right, what we would call third-party information. So, on one hand, government saying, well, we'll give you a break in terms of you as a startup. I'm assuming that that startup is for a young person, but the law does not discriminate whether it's for a young person or for, but as we know that it's mainly young people that are trying to start businesses and benefit. The catch, of course, like I said, is that then you're expected to give third-party information, that if I've dealt with you, you've supplied me or I've supplied you, then I should be able to give that information to the revenue authorities. And in that way, they can be able to track that even though me, as Allan, my business has been exempted from paying taxes for 3 years, the people I deal with, on the other hand, they can be traced within the system to say, I supplied you, on my side it's a cost, on your side it's an income, so you should be able to also account for it. So that is commendable, and I think that is going into the right direction. Of course, the big elephant in the room is that for human capital development, let me call it the human capital development, and the other thing maybe I could say that this is the first budget within the NDP4. So yes, so the idea would be that we've seen that resources had been allocated when it came to infrastructure development, when it came to production of power or electricity and all that. And the missing link, or the where we thought or where we had hoped that we would see more resources or more funding, was when it comes to human capital development, when it comes to health, when it comes to education, when it comes to sectors like ICT. I'm very passionate about ICT because that's where the world is moving right now. Yes. So when you're talking about an education system where people are still learning to code, yet AI can do that in pretty much in a prompt of 3 lines, you get a website, for example. But
and if you say that in regard, reflecting on IT in particular, we've been having a conversation on a digital economy, a monetarized system, digital monetarized systems, and really the conversation was if Uganda is really ready for that system, but also looking at the funding for it. Has it even been thought about in the budget? Yet the world is moving so fast, and someone in the rural areas has to be included.
Yes, and I think that is where, and that's what, when you talked about priorities, I think for me, that's where I was expecting to see actually more, regardless of the fact that most of our budget is being taken to service and repay debt. I think that's where we were supposed to see very strong priorities in terms of funding, because when you look at the ICT sector, for example, is that right now, you know, a few years ago, I'll give an example. A few years ago, people would say, I'm not going to use Facebook, I'm not going to use WhatsApp, I'm not going to use any of those things, because that was the technology at that time. And those are not very many years ago, like about 5-10 years ago. Then what happens? What happens is that every phone that comes out today, some of those applications or some of that technology comes pre-installed. So you even don't have almost a choice. So it's the same thing when it comes to, for example, AI, that the things that are being done now, they may not be accessible to everyone, but in about 3, 4, 5 years, you will not have a smartphone. If it's not AI enabled, it will not be smart. If there's certain technologies that we'll have at our disposal, but we'll just be consumers. Let me put it that way, that we've not prepared to participate in that economy. And how would we participate is if we allocate resources to also match the needs of the day. And I'll give an example. I was giving an example that right now there are video editing. There are people that are studying, for example, in our universities, how to edit videos, how to do what, and then all of a sudden overnight, a company comes and you can do it. I don't have to have gone to video school. I don't have to have done that. I just put in a few prompts and that happens. I don't have I would not have had to go to coding school, for example, to, you know, do it's called software engineering.
Yes, yes.
You know,
or
to
information
do
technology.
information technology.
Yes.
Within a few prompts, we have now access to some of these systems. So the question then would be, how are we preparing our young people for such a thing? And the only way we can prepare for them is if we invest resources, if we allocate resources in that sector, in the ICT sector, in the education sector that matches the need of the day. And we will not, we may bury our heads and say we shall catch up, maybe we shall, but the challenge with that is that then we just become consumers. It takes out the money, that even the little we, you know.
Yes.
Yes.
From that particular point, allow me interject with this, from how you've laid it indeed. Do you think, and keeping in mind that Uganda is mostly populated by citizens who are 30 years and below.
Yes, about 73%.
Yes, about 73% indeed. Is the budget that is to be read today, 2025-2026, do you think it's pro-people?
No, when we put it pro-people, not pro-people, I may not give a very definite answer on that.
Yes.
What I can say is that where you find that about almost 40% of your budget is going to debt repayment. That is a budget that then, those are resources that you would ideally have used to finance the people agenda, I will call it that. If you have, for example, a budget where about 8 trillion is going for the wage bill, it's money that you're going to be paying salaries that, I wouldn't say, okay, you will have a return on investment, but it's not an investment per se. It's not, it's not human capital development. It's not that we are going to put a road, for example. No, you're going to pay salary tomorrow. You borrow to pay another salary, like that. So whether it's pro-people or not pro-people, I think the question would be, for us as young people, what are the priorities? What are the biggest challenges or questions of our day-to-day? And there are about 3 of them. We have the biggest one, of course, is unemployment. Are we putting resources, for example, into seeing how young people, for example, get out of unemployment, or they improve on their livelihoods? And if you say, okay, we've allocated 1 trillion for the parish development model, yeah, out of 72 trillion, let me say. So the question is, you're expecting for all the parishes in this country to use 1 trillion Uganda shillings for their development. The assumption is that when that 100 million reaches a parish, young people will have about 30 million, because you said we are going to earmark 30% for young people and all that. So the question then would be, out of 72 trillion or 73 trillion, and you're allocating 1 trillion for the 73%, because young people below 15, about 50%, between 15 and 30, about 22%. So that's about 73% of the population. You're allocating 1 trillion. So I will not say whether it's, but I'm just asking. Yes. And of course you will say, but even these other things that we are doing them for the benefit. But that's where you're putting resources. That's where you're saying that if, for example, we can have a budget, I think what I can talk about, let me say, use, for example, the budget of donations, where you have about 140-something billion for donations. And of course, would be, what if we had allocated, for the things we want to donate for example, what if we had also just allocated that money within the budget, and we say, if we are going to donate it to young people, then put it in means of gender, and right, put it under, let me say, the Youth and Children's Department. If you're saying we are going to donate to sports, there is a ministry responsible for that. If you, so me, the question, I think, to answer your question, not in direct terms, but it's where we are saying that this is money that is going to benefit directly the population of this country. It's usually out of 72 trillion, if you're allocating 1 trillion, then I think it may answer the question that you've asked, whether it is. So me, I think we just look at personally, what I'm interested in is to say how much on the priorities that we have. Right. When we say we are going to, for example, invest, let me just go to youth unemployment. Of course, like I said, I started by saying there have been some incentives. You know, you don't pay tax here. We've made a few things here and there. That is all commendable. But the question then would be, out of this whole budget, when it comes to addressing the issues that we want to address, are we seeing the resources there? The answer is no. And those are critical sectors that we've been talking about when we talk about ICT, when you talk about tourism, when you talk about education, when you talk about health. Those are sectors that we need to see, because when the being is fine and that environment is there, that enabling environment, then these other things usually sort themselves out.
So then one would wonder, during the budget formulation process, were the youth effectively consulted?
Of course,
because it looks like the budget was targeted to people who might not feed into it as effectively as they should.
Of course, consultation can take very many forms. If I told you, today come and maybe present like we are here, you can say, by the way, we had Allan on UBC. He said some few things we had. So I think we had the youth voice. Consultation could also mean we have a budget hearing and the budget committee come give your views. Consultation might also mean you're at the local government level and they call a meeting, they say we are planning for this maybe town council. But the question then there is, if we give opinions,
right,
and the requirement, I think, is for us to be heard. It doesn't necessarily mean that whatever we say will be taken on. But this is, I think, a question of how are we prioritize. Again, we go back to the priorities. That as a young person, when we're talking about unemployment, when we're talking about immigration, mobility, of how do we, when you're having very many young people, for example, leaving the country to go and look for opportunities elsewhere, and even when they do that, they even send back, a lot of resources in terms of remittances and all that. The question then would be, for a young person, when I'm looking at allocations to defense, Uganda has not been at war for a very long time. I will say this. Of course, there could be some security challenges outside of our borders, which may have implications within our borders. But relatively, I would say we've been a peaceful country. We've not been at war. We've not been fighting conventional, let me call them conventional wars or something. So the question would be then, in peaceful time, if we are spending so much money in what I would call peaceful time, in terms of defense, in terms of internal securities and all that, then what will happen if there's actual war? Would we have, so those are some of the questions that we would ask. But secondly is to say that for some of these things, especially when it comes to this financial year, because, for example, this financial year is when we will also have our elections. We usually end of January or February.
Beginning of Feb.
Yes. So it means that even for certain processes, whether there were political processes where you expect that young people may participate or what, this would have been the year to say, at least we pretend that we want to make young people happy. We say that, given the politics of this financial year, at least we add in some of these programs, or at least we make them work, or at least we. But of course, like I said, you follow the money, you see where have you allocated most, and then for us, you get to know that, no, I don't think this is a budget that is going to work for young people. Right,
75% of Uganda's population is a young population and eligible to vote, at least about 22 are, 18 years and above, up to 30 years. That means that they are able to vote and cast their votes, and clearly that's what Allan is speaking into. Now, there's a comment from Timothy that I'm trying to read, but as I get it, let me just look at accountability, especially as this conversation starts to come to its end. How do you think, we have what we have, it's already available. PDM money has been allocated, the youth funds have been allocated in the different areas, and we really have to work with what's already available. It can't be taken back. So in your perspective, how do you think the youth, moving forward in these 5 years, how best can us as the youth engage? and hold government accountable for implementing youth-focused budget priorities that it has laid out for us? How can we tap into what's available?
Thank you very much. I think, to correct you, I think it's okay, we already have a budget, but some of these things can be undone. We've seen our parliament pass supplementary budgets, quite big supplementary budgets, as and when they need resources for certain other things. So whereas the cake has been baked, I think if we really are intentional, there are certain things we can actually revisit, and then, but from a practical side of it, it may not happen, it may happen, but I was just trying to say that we could actually have a supplementary to say...
That window is there.
Yes, that window is there to say that, you know what, maybe we missed this, but for the sake of our young people, let's do this. But to answer your question on how then can young people engage or hold government to account, I think we start with wastage. And wastage not in terms of... when we usually talk about wastage, we're talking about things like entertainment and meals. It's about 130 billion for entertainment and meals, special meals and all that. Right. And all. So for us, I think the one thing is that I should feel money in my pockets. For me to be able to interact with the budget, I'm either doing business with government and I'm being paid. I'm either having a situation whereby I can do business, pay my fair share of tax, and then still feel money in my pocket. I can be able to then have a conversation with, and this is where I want really to put the fire to our members of parliament, because the buck begins and ends with them. Of course, the executive will suggest, but when it comes to actual allocation of resources, actual accountability for resources, it's usually our members of parliament that are responsible for this. And I think for young people, that's where we have to start, especially in this period where people will come and say, there is no medicine in Mulago, but my area MP passed the budget for Mulago, for example. Whether he passed it or not, but he was responsible to ask the questions. You may, of course, we have majority rule, but at least what did you say about yes? But if then you've not been able to do that, then as a young person, I'm entitled to say, okay, this time around, I need someone that will talk for and on my behalf.
Now, Allan, allow me just pause it there. We definitely have to bring this to a close because time is such an enemy. But still, these conversations on the budget continue. Even as it's read today, there's post-budget analysis that takes place. And we'll have Allan back next week on the show on Good Morning Uganda. Thank you so much for being on the show. The budget is going to be read today, and it will be at 2 p.m. live here on UBC TV. It will be aired to you, so be sure